tonight, it's probably the big news. My wife's out of town for a couple of days, so.
You said what?
So my wife is out of town a couple of days.
Okay.
Found a setting on my Zoom that makes me closer instead of sitting way back.
Well, I entitled this meeting as White Fear, Hesitation, and Reluctance. It's something that comes up almost every time we're talking. And so how are we going to do it? How are we going to ever wake up the people of not just the United States, but at least the United States, or at least a part of the United States?
Well, are we officially on the air?
We are.
Well, I thought maybe we were just chit-chatting. So the question is, how are we going to wake people up? My experience is that people need to have a point of reference before they understand reality. And they do not have a point of reference by and large. People down south tend to be more conservative, more patriotic because they have the point of reference. That is, they have experienced what it's like. But people up north, by and large, they're really, I think they're more segregated in the north because white people tend to live in the suburbs, you know. And yeah, there are Black people who live in the suburbs as well, but by and large, Black people like to be amongst themselves. So if you go into a Black neighborhood, you don't find a lot of white people. You don't find a lot of Hispanics or East Asians. You find basically Black people, and that seems to be the way they like it, which is fine. But the point being is that those who are not living in those, what I call urban jungle areas, which I guess the word ghetto has gone out of vogue. So those who don't live in the urban jungle areas don't know what it's like. They don't have a point of reference. And if you don't know what you're fighting against, you have no fight in you. So the only way, in my opinion, that we're going to get people to change is we have to somehow get them that point of reference. And the media has, and the educational systems have done a superb job from their perspective in making sure that our point of reference is very different from reality. For example, I heard once that, don't know if this is true or not, you may know more about this than I do, but they say during World War II, there were some propaganda films, particularly in Canada, I think, in which Russian families were portrayed as if they were American families. Dad would get up and go to work every day, and mom would be the homemaker. Do what?
I said, I've never heard this. This is very interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, but, well, I don't even know if it's true or not, but if it is true, the point is those were effectively propaganda films, and the intention was to give Americans or Canadians a false point of reference that Russians are just like us. And psychologists know that we favor people who are like us. And so the whole idea was to give us that fake point of reference so that we would feel good about working with the Russians, fighting the Germans. And then, of course, the Germans were portrayed as monsters. So that was our point of reference. Now, advance forward to 2021 and into 2022, and the point of reference is what you see when you watch television and you see commercials. Same thing, I don't watch television hardly at all, and if I do, it's by accident. My wife watches shows at night, and if I happen to be passing through, you know, I'll pick up and I'll see the commercials, but I do watch YouTube quite a bit. And the commercials on YouTube, basically the same strategy. And the point of reference is that there is no urban jungle. You know, there is no violent crime. And if there is a problem with crime, it's always put to the blame of white people. And that's our point of reference, and it works. Because we are convinced, the human mind, you probably know this, but the human mind, we know what fiction is. We turn on a television show. We know this, what is it, NCIS or something like that. We know that's fiction, but our subconscious does not know it. Consciously, we can tell this is fiction unconsciously it embeds itself in our mind. And that becomes our point of reference. And another good example of that is the sitcom. It was more of a sit than it was a com, but All in the Family. You remember that? And so the point of reference there was anyone with a conservative traditional perspective was an Archie Bunker. And anybody with a liberal point of view was a progressive like a Meathead. And they tried to mesh that together where it seemed to be very real. And everyone knew that show was fiction, but it affected us subconsciously. And so it changed the way we think. So people would wonder today, you know, Charles, how is it possible that just a few years ago, I mean, easily within our lifetime, homosexuality was considered anathema? And you may want to blip that out because YouTube might delete your video.
What it was considered not just anathema, but a disease. It was listed in the diagnostic manual of psychology as a mental illness.
Yeah, I think number 3 it was listed, and maybe number 4 they took it out. I don't recall, but yeah, it was a mental illness, and everybody knew it. It wasn't even something that you think about, but our point of reference changed. And Anita Bryant was demonized, vilified, you know, ripped to shreds by every comedian, you know, late night talk show host, even Jay Leno would pick on her some. So that was, that became our national mindset, our milieu. That was our social perspective. So that all goes back to your question, how are we going to change people's minds? We have to change a point of reference. The only way to do that, which I don't think is practical going to happen, is you have to get white people to live in, I mean, at least a month or 2 to live in the urban jungle, move them into a black housing project, let them experience it. I mean, that's how I developed my point of reference. Is I didn't live there, but I went to school there. You know, it's 4 years at a majority black high school, and you learn like the very first day, this is not the way things are perceived, but the myth was still presented in the classroom that, you know, the civil rights nonsense and all of that, that, by the way, civil rights is not nonsense, but that civil rights movement, which was really not civil rights, in my opinion, that was nonsense. And so they would teach one thing in the school classroom. As soon as you walked outside the classroom, you had to face reality. And so what they were teaching in the classroom went by the wayside very quickly. And there were some white kids who just didn't get it, and they went along with the nonsense. But by and large, most of the white kids got it. I mean, they understood this is we're going to school at a very dangerous school, and some of the teachers got it. They wouldn't say it. They wouldn't say it in the classroom, but some of the teachers that I met after I graduated from high school that I would see here and there, they were some of them were really upset with how dangerous it was for the white kids at that school, because you literally cannot walk into a restroom without, you know, endanger your life. Possibly there were some kids who were seriously injured because they were just set upon, you know, like by predators. I call them urban savages. That is reality, but nobody knows it. That's not their point of reference. Our point of reference is all Black Americans have suffered indignities and discrimination. This is not reality. So to answer your question, we maybe should present a question. So the question is, how can we change their minds? And the question that answers the question is, how can we change their point of reference so that they see reality for what it is without being stupid, you know? Because I personally, I think it's immoral and illogical to dislike anyone because of immutable characteristics such as race or whatever. That's just flat out wrong. But it's also immoral and illogical to deny reality. And the people that we're ultimately hurting are the people that the Marxists tell us that they're trying to help, which is not true. Because I think anyone who is honest knows that white people are the goose that lays the golden eggs, and has been for generations, as long as there has been even a semblance of integration, including colonialism in Africa and elsewhere. We have always enhanced the lives of people we touched. Obviously, there are some exceptions, and always the Marxists will exploit the exceptions and make that seem like the norm. And there are no other exceptions. White people are always bad. But does that answer your question?
Sort of. I mean, it's a complex answer because it suggests something that's almost impossible. You're suggesting sharing experience rather than teaching. And since you're sharing experience, I'm just wondering, I know one other person, and you've met her once, who's been to a Black area high school and was faced with this. And I was wondering if I should invite her to this podcast, as I talked to her earlier and she's in town. Do you mind if I do that?
No, that'd be fine.
Do you remember Jessica?
I do not remember Jessica. What's her last name?
Jessica Reavis. Let me just see if I can get her, because what you're saying is so interesting, and it's Jessica will answer. It's different. It's definitely something she's got some relevant experience to. I've never had any experience really, except driving through Black areas, and that's not. Yeah, I tried. I tried. See if she calls it back, but anyhow, it's just it's interesting because I'll just tell you what Jessica has told me. Her experience is different as a girl, obviously, and also generationally different. She was in school in the 1990s, and in the 1990s, she was basically ridiculed and threatened because she wouldn't date a Black guy who wanted to date her. And, you know, I can't imagine, I can't imagine teachers telling students who they should go out with. I mean, in my experience, it's like the teachers that I had basically wanted to pretend that we were robots and that, you know, post-pubescent or not, the only possible interest we could have in any activities with the opposite sex would be at formal dances and proms, and that there was nothing else.
That is because they were never teenagers.
No,
They forget. I mean, how quick they forget.
And you know, but I mean, the opposite is even worse. I think. I think it's just monstrous that Jessica has the story of a teacher who basically, I think she was a mixed race teacher. I wish we could get her online, but basically she was somebody who said you were a monster if you don't want to go out with this kid. I mean, how's that for interfering in somebody's in a parent's upbringing, in a child's life? You know, I mean, it's so far beyond my experience, I can't imagine it. And if that's common in any sense, I mean, or if it's unique, it's I guess whether it's common or unique, the fact that it's possible. And this was in Virginia, of course, a southern state that basically has been under occupation, if you want to think about it that way, for 140 years, 150 years. And in other words, we have a society that is capable of telling us who we should hang out with in the most, you know, personal and intimate way.
That goes back to the principle of the societal change. You know, we were talking about how our attitude toward homosexuality is in the aggregate has changed, and the same thing about race relations. It has changed. Well, what changed it and why did it change? by and large, I would say it's the media and the educational system. Now, that teacher, whoever she happened to be, probably got what she believed was social justice, or somehow dealing with the white devil bourgeoisie class, probably got that in college. That is my guess. I think I mentioned this once before, but you could take a high school girl who has been a Christian school rather, maybe a Baptist or whoever fundamentalist, ship her off to the University of Wisconsin or some other far left university, and within a matter of weeks, they'll have that girl brainwashed. I mean, suddenly she will see the light. She'll see it. Oh, this has been we're abused by white males, and they totally get it. Of course, they get it wrong. But so I'm guessing that teacher who was pressing this girl was herself subjected to that type of indoctrination, and it took hold. And that's one of the problems we have to deal with. But anyhow, the solution is we have to change the point of reference. How to do that, I have no idea. I mean, I could tell you how to do it, but how to get it done, we need to take over the media.
In the case of Jessica is she said no. She just said no. And even with the pressure, she continued to say no. And this is how she became called the white devil in her middle school class. I mean, we're not even talking high school here. I believe I'm hoping that she'll be able to join us, but she was not even in high school when this happened, and her resistance shows something unique about her, I guess, her family background and her upbringing, and that I think, I mean, that's critical to my experience, and I wonder. I mean, I wonder how we substitute for that, because just putting people in what you're calling the urban jungle, I mean, that's kind of like shock treatment, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. They're trying to do it backwards, where they're sending the jungle to us, not us to them. But I wonder, Charles, if you take that argument backwards, the teachers have no business telling kids that they have to do that or that they should do it. But do teachers have any business telling students that they should not do it? That interracial dating is immoral. Do they have a right or an obligation to tell students that, or should they just stay out of it?
Well, I mean, I thought that they stayed out of it. I guess I thought that was the overwhelming.
That was the default. Yeah.
I mean, because like I said, my high school, I went to a private high school, of course, and they just, if any hint of sexuality came up in a class, or if somebody implied that someone else in the class was attracted to anyone else, and you're just, oh, please leave that out of the classroom. We don't want to hear that. It's totally inappropriate. It's déclassé. That stuff is just not right. And so that's a way of saying nothing. And that's the way of saying nothing, I think. And that's why I said it's so strange to me that there was in your high school experience, were there pressures to socialize in any sense? I mean, or what? I mean, I guess was it so overwhelmingly Black that you either socialized with Blacks or you didn't socialize at all?
I don't recall any pressure whatsoever to socialize with Blacks or Blacks to socialize with whites.
What were the percentages? I mean, what were the percentages of the high school you went to?
It was about 51% Black and 49% whites. It was almost evenly divided, but it was still barely majority Black. But I attended the largest high school in the state. There were like 5,000 students. And the campus to my knowledge, it's one of maybe, could be the only high school campus in the country that is laid out like a college campus, where when you pass from class to class, you go outside, go to another building, you know. Typically, you got a music building, you got another building for something else, and it was just like a college campus. So you wore your coat all day long because you're running outside all day long, which was kind of nice, I thought. But there was no pressure, you know. It was just considered.
You're not talking about a uniform type coat.
No, it was a public high school, but it was considered morally acceptable to not be a racist. And it was considered morally acceptable to accept everybody. You know, it was still this is before equity, when they were still on equality. Who knows what's going to come after equity, but to probably forced. No, I mean, I can recall there was a guy who had a black girlfriend, but a school that big, you know, nobody pays a whole lot of attention, but you know, you see him walking around campus, no big deal. I had black friends. You know, I had a black girl once come up and hold my hand. I don't know what she was doing. I knew her, kind of a friend, you know, but that didn't last very long. But you know, people.
That was a white girl in this case.
No, that was a black girl.
Oh, black girl. I said a white girl came up.
Yeah, but people turn around and stare, make dirty looks, but you know, whatever.
She was flirting, in other words.
She may have been. I don't know. My problem is, you know, when you have Asperger's, you can't tell when somebody's flirting, or, you know, what's this person doing? Why are they doing this? And, you know.
I take it you didn't ask her.
Nah, but I was friendly with her, you know. So we were both in the choir. Got to know each other, hung around a little bit, but yeah, she may have had some amorous ambitions, but if she did, I didn't pick up on it. And I think ultimately she got mad at me because I didn't, or because she probably assumed I was a racist. You know, she doesn't like me. He doesn't like me because I'm black. Because that is their default position. It's always because you're racist, you know, and I can understand that too. I think it's wrong, but you know, this is what we do. It's because I'm a woman, or because I'm a man, or because I'm old. You know, we always have some default reason. But to answer your question, there was no real pressure to integrate. Just wasn't. Black kids sat on one side of the cafeteria, white kids sat on the other. There were a few that intermingled, but almost none. And it was flat out dangerous to go on the black side of the cafeteria. They would attack you, period. And there were more than one riot in the cafeteria where we had to clear out, get out of the way or get hurt, you know. And there was a cop that we had police officers. I may have told you this in the past, but we had police officers. Our high school was their beat. That's where, you know, that was their job. When they went to work, they came to our school every day. That was their permanent assignment. And this is before schools had cops, you know, and that's just how violent it was. But it just became so obvious, like the first day, there's something, these are not dark white people, you know, with a few exceptions, maybe 10% exceptions, but yeah, these kids, they had no family, they had no vocabulary. What they did have, you couldn't understand them. Most of the vocabulary was profanity. They were loud, obnoxious, and if you got anywhere near them, they'd hit you. You know, that's just what they did. We'd have black kids who would stand inside the entranceway of one of the buildings, and when you walk in, they ask you for money. If you don't give it to them, they hit you in the head. You know, and they would do that until somebody came and chased them off. You know, somebody in authority position. I walked on campus one day, and there were 3 or 4 black kids, and they had this white kid on the pavement kicking his head in, literally. And this is, you know, we see stuff like this in the newspaper, and people don't realize, that's what I mean by point of reference. This happens every single day, you know? And one of the reasons I talk so much about black on white homicide is because nobody else is talking about it, and that is reality that everyone's missing. There was a story that came out in the news last week where there was this, trailer park. Some black guy was crawling in the window of his white neighbor. I think this is the only black guy who lived in the trailer park. And his white neighbor shot him dead. And of course, that was obviously racism. And that's one of the few stories that I ever read, interracial black on white or white on black, in which they even bothered to mention race. But if it's black on white, race is incidental. You would never know if they didn't include the photographs of the suspect and the victim. But when it's white on black, even though it's justifiable homicide, then they talk about race, and I don't think they ever did post the white guy's picture, but the headline that I saw in virtually every news venue mentioned race, white guy shoots black guy. And then they said how they were friends and it was inexcusable. And the neighbors said it was not justifiable, even though the guy was climbing through his window. The police said it was justifiable. They got the facts, I think, got their facts straight. So we're.
Go on, because I'm going to ask you a question, but finish what you're saying.
Well, I was saying that's just that is the reality that we're living in. It's a false reality, but that is the point of reference that we are accepting as reality, and it's wrong. I mean, it's wrong in the sense not only of immoral, but it's incorrect. So we need to set the record straight. But there was a point in time, Charles, in this country where that did not happen. I mean, if a black person attacked a white person, there would be a riot, and it would be white people rioting. A lot of people not aware of that, the Red Summer, we've talked about that before. The thing in Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma, which according to every leftist was totally inexcusable. What they don't tell you is, a black mob showed up an armed black mob showed up at the courthouse. And the white community was fed up with black crime. Finally, they had enough and they burned down the white community. Well, the leftists rather leave all that out until, they lie by omission until you get to the part where white people finally got fed up and took a stand. Then suddenly it's white racism. But, what was the city, Kenosha or whatever, where Black Lives Matter is accused of, and Antifa is accused of basically burning down the neighborhood? Same thing, isn't it? Maybe not as much damage, but they're burning down a black neighborhood. But that's okay because they're on the left, That's the point of reference that we're coming from. Somehow we got to get into the mind, and that's one of the reasons we're censored so much on social media and on YouTube and elsewhere. If you talk about this, if you show videos of black on white violence, they'll take you down, because they can't have the truth out there, because they are weaving this false tale, this false narrative. And we are to accept that as if it were reality. And that's exactly what we're doing. Now, you had Rick Tyler on.
Yeah, yesterday.
I was watching his interview with a local news down in Tennessee. And I was surprised that the interviewer, the presenter, did a very fair job letting him talk and, say what he wanted to say. But we saw that coming through with Rick, where he's just accepting reality for what it is, But there are some people who get it. But the woman, I guess it was the wife of the guy who owns the billboard company, had the billboard taken down, or at least had the vinyl portion of the sign taken down. And I don't know if Rick ever got compensated for that or not, or reimbursed.
He said he did last night.
he did or did not? You say he did?
He did not.
Oh, he did. He never got his money back.
He never filed suit because he didn't feel like it was worth doing.
Okay. But that woman's attitude is, well, it didn't exist a few years ago. I'm talking a few decades ago, but probably 100 years ago, just was not there. 50 years ago, it was there. So something changed our minds. So what got inside of her head that, what's her beef with the Hart-Celler Act, which is basically Rick's point. We just need to repeal. He didn't say this, but this is what I gathered. The Hart-Celler Act needs to be repealed. And we need to go back to the immigrant.
if he had put up a sign that said that, no one would have understood it. No one would have taken it down.
If it said what, repeal Hart-Celler Act?
Yeah. Can you imagine if he had put up instead of "Make America White Again," if he had put up a sign that said "Repeal Hart-Celler," repeal the, or even repeal the Immigration Act of 1965.
You might want to try that, but his point was that he was making, I think, was that, and we're kind of rehearsing what you guys talked about, but his point was he got like $1 million of free publicity. Not free, he paid a little bit for it. He got a bargain. And he said the sign was up, what, 10 hours?
Yeah, only 10 hours, and people are still talking about it 5 years later.
Yeah, I often wonder why he doesn't put up his own sign, buy some real estate. And I think I don't know if it's federal law or just a state law that you can put a sign on your property. So if I want to put a big old sign out front of my house, I can do that. And I don't know if that's true in Tennessee or not, but if it is, basically all he needs to do, if he's got the resources and maybe he could find donations, is to buy some real estate, put up a sign, see if he needs a permit, maybe not. But if it's residential, I don't think he does. He'll have to check with his local laws or state laws or whatever. Put up a sign, permanent, boom, there it is. But it may not have the impact. I think the fact that the media responded was, gave him far more publicity than the sign itself. It's kind of like, I know we're off topic here, but it's kind of like these guys who are putting up these little stickers around that says something to the effect that it's okay to be white or something like that. They may have a different mantra they put up. Nobody notices those things. I mean, a few people do, but it's when the media makes us think about it. That's the value of putting up those stickers. And the media is too dumb to know it. Or maybe they've caught on now because I haven't heard much about it. But you can do something really tiny and little like that. And if the media picks up on it so they can prove that racism is alive and well in the United States, you just bought yourself, who knows how many thousands of dollars worth of free advertising, because when one media outlet picks it up, then the others have to pick it up or they look like they're not paying attention. And there is a real strategy that, the American Freedom Party did this thing with robocalls, which, by the way, I was opposed to because I thought it was hokey. Turns out I was wrong. And the robocalls, I don't think did anything, but the media reaction to them gave the American Freedom Party unprecedented news coverage. I don't think the party has ever had that much attention before, ever. And just the fact that there are people out there doing that, is in and of itself very convincing to a lot of people.
Convincing of what? I mean, I was going to say, did it do any good?
Yeah, what it does, it says there is a movement that is alive and well who are interested in reality, in that not everybody is falling to the propaganda machine. Almost sounds like a conspiracy theory, but
I've been wanting to ask you this question for like 20 minutes now. You were in high school and it was dangerous for you to go to a certain part of the school cafeteria. And I assume there were other parts of the cafeteria where it was dangerous to go, or other parts of the school besides the cafeteria where it was dangerous to go. Did no parents ever complain about that? Did no parents ever react to that? Did no students ever react to that? I mean, what even, this is in the 60s or the 70s? When was it?
Both. 68, 69, 70, 71.
So nobody reacted to this? Nobody said, this is no way to run a school. What are you school administrators doing with our tax dollars?
No, it never did. I remember there was one instant where a white girl got on a city bus full of black kids and they beat her to a pulp, which is, here comes Jessica, which is to be expected, to be anticipated. You just don't do that. And that picked up media attention. But when there was, when we were attacked en masse on campus, which had happened a couple times, the media would come out, because the police would come and the media would follow, and they would say there was violence with racial overtones. That's the way they explained it. But to answer your question, there she is. To answer your question, no,
No one reacted.
no one reacted. There's Jessica. How are you?
Pretty good. How about y'all?
You look very comfortable or something.
Yeah,
You're at a different angle
I
from
gotta stay by the plug into the wall. It's stuck to the umbilical cord because the phone's about dead.
Jessica, I invited you to join us because Kenn has told me several times about his experiences in high school.
As a
And
what?
Kenn has told me several times about his real life experiences in high school, going to an integrated high school in the late 60s, early 70s. And he was telling me that basically there were parts of the school, including parts of the school cafeteria, where he could not go because Black kids would attack him immediately. This is in Indiana. This is in the North, where everybody cares about race relations. And I was trying to summarize, tell him your story, but I wanted to bring you in to tell your story about how you became the White Devil.
Well,
our basic question is, how do we change the mindset of people who seem not to care about these things happening? And I mean, tell that story from your perspective. What happened? How you became the White Devil?
well, I guess when I was really a lot younger, when I was in like kindergarten, we'll start there. Of course, when I start going to school, in a really small rural town, it was not hardly any blacks at all in the school period. And of course the black ones that were there, they catered to them. Everything they did was right. They could do no wrong, obviously. And I remember the very first fight I ever got into, because my granddaddy, he would always have these old shirts, and then of course I was very good with drawing. So I'd draw a big old Confederate flag on the front of his shirt. I'd wear it to school. And because I was taught at a young age, how proud to be of the flag and stuff, and my heritage and my ancestry. So then, like I said, kindergarten, we almost got expelled, me and my brother, because we got into a nice fight because this one black boy tried to touch me, in an inappropriate way, because I had to wear a dress to photo day. Well, my brother seen it basically, and he beat the hell out of it. He tried to beat the black off of that dude. And then the sister tried to jump in, and then I jumped on her, and so nobody got in trouble except for me and my brother. So, and then of course, after I got into middle school, I remember I had this cross that my mom had given me, and it had a little knife on it, and it had little flowers on it. I mean, it was really cool looking. And then I had my Confederate flag shirts, which I was able to actually buy some that were printed at that point. And some of my friends that gave me. And then I remember the teacher, she's like talking about being the center of attention, that I needed to be put in the center of attention. So she put me in the middle of the classroom and put all the desks around me facing me. And she says, well, we got to keep an eye on the White Devil because she's the Ku Klux Klan because of her necklace and her shirts and stuff. And she's racist and all this. And I remember she kept saying all kinds of really nasty stuff about me. And I told her specifically, I said, well, if you keep on talking about God's children like that, then God's going to mess you up. Except in other words, but anyway. keep them PG. So, needless to say, she just started laughing hysterically. Oh, what, you're God's kids? I said, yeah, I'm God's kids. You're gonna find out. So she took a bite of a cake or something like that, and I don't know. I guess she started laughing about time she took a bite of the cake, and then she just dropped to the floor because she started choking. Then all the kids were laughing, and Miss Barksdale's choking. Everybody started running all around her and stuff, and I leaned over top of her and I told her, I said, yeah, I told you God was going to get you, didn't I? So she changed her whole perception about me after that day. I guess she thought I was like, some kind of evil demon or something for sure after that. But, of course, they made us ride on the bus for an hour. We had a local school that we could attend, but they made all of us in the county ride a bus for an entire hour just so that we could be bused to the city schools where all the blacks were. So we were definitely a minority in the middle school. Well, high school wasn't that bad. I pretty much got left alone there, but I mean, that's pretty much a story there. But really, if you say that kind of stuff, the first thing that they're going to say, well, it was your fault because you wore a Confederate flag, or you had the ideals of the Confederacy, so you deserved what you got. So,
Jessica,
yeah.
Did you intentionally leave out what I thought was the key part of the white devil story? Because I thought it had to do with the fact that there was a black kid who wanted to date you and you refused.
Oh, yeah. Well, hold on, let me try to get this thing. So yeah, I ended up getting into a fight afterward. Well, before I guess I got put in the
How many
center of the
fights did
ring.
you get into? Jeez.
Well, quite a few in school.
Man, I should have gone to school with you. I'd walk behind you.
Well, in the middle school, right before I was put in the center of the classroom, there was this one black dude. He was really interested in me, and I told him, I was like, look, that's not the way I was raised. I don't believe in mixing races. It was, well, you must be racist. I said, no, the way I was brought up, I don't agree with race mixing. I never have dated a black guy, and I never will. I don't hate you, but that's just the way I was raised. So, needless to say, some of the other black girls didn't like that. They actually wanted to date him instead, and they were like, well, what are you, racist because you won't date this guy or whatever? And I said, no, again, it's just the way I was raised. So then she knocked my books off on the floor, and I said some really nasty words. So she's like, she came up in my face and tried to fight me in the classroom. And then the teacher basically said, well, don't do it in here. Take her to the bathroom. Well, I went to the bathroom and I got jumped by several of them. So, but
okay, I asked you the same question I asked Ken. What happened? What happened as a result of getting jumped?
Say it again.
What happened? Who reacted, if anybody?
Well, I mean, I just basically just try to tell them, my whole ideology, and it wasn't good enough. They think that all white people should bend down to every need or whatever, but I didn't instigate it. But again, you have a school that is slam full of blacks and you're a white minority in that school. So, you give a little bit, but you ain't, you don't go against your morals unless you're just a complete cuck, I guess. But I don't know.
Well, you never get jumped one on one. Never. That I can
Never.
recall.
You got that right. They don't know how to fight one on one.
Yeah, I recall when I was little, I heard somebody say that 2 against 1 is a Negro fund. Negro fund, only they use the pejorative. And I had no idea what that meant. I thought it was kind of a strange saying, but I found out. But I recall only once when I was jumped by a single black guy. And I think he was on drugs. I was able to push him away. So that was no big deal. But not just me, but anytime you ever see him fight, it's always a group. And something else I noticed, I don't know if you saw this at your school, Jessica, but I noticed, I was telling Charles our school was laid out like a college campus, and you would walk from, from building to building when you change classes. But I would notice the black kids would walk together in large groups. I mean, just a mob of kids. I don't even know how they did it. Like a flock of birds, just how did they know where to go? I don't know. But white kids would walk around, maybe 2 or 3, usually just by themselves. And that just struck me as peculiar. Not that it was right or wrong, it was just different. But I noticed when you see black kids, particularly teenagers, out and about, maybe at a shopping mall, shopping center, or at a fair, same thing, just a mob of them. It's like they're glued together by some invisible force that holds them together. And have you ever seen that? Have you observed that?
Yes, I have. And then, of course, you have those all apologetic whites that are out on the outskirts, like the fringes of the large black crowds, but I mean, I've seen a lot of fights, just basically them trying to make a point when they would see that individual white person or whatever, that, we're rednecks or white supremacists, or in my case, I was the white devil. And when we'd be left out by ourselves and our own demise, then they would make a game of it to attack us.
It's a sport. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they do it today. You'll see them on the news. They'll just walk up to some random person and just knock the hell out of them and then run away like little bitches.
Yeah, they were talking about what they called the knockout game a couple of years ago, as if that was some new phenomenon. I was saying, what are you talking about? They were doing that 50 years ago when I was in high school. And 50 years before that, Abraham Lincoln was jumped. He and a buddy were jumped by a mob of black guys when he was 19 years old. And a lot of people don't know this about Lincoln, not this Lincoln, but Abraham Lincoln, that he was a boxer. I mean, he was a really good fighter. And I think he was jumped by, these two were jumped by 7 black guys, and Lincoln managed to fight them off. And they made their getaway on a boat because they were on the Mississippi River. But the point of that being, this is behavior that has not changed over generations. I believe it's innate. And I realize not all black people act like this, but I think if you have low IQ, low executive function, low impulse control, low effective empathy, all of those elements combined, I think maybe the cause, but at least contribute to that violent behavior. And it seems to mellow as they get older, but it's still there. You see old black people punching each other. It's just weird. But the moral of the story is stay away from them, because you can't, you go to school, if you're going to fight them, that's all you're going to do. And you're going to be overwhelmed and you're going to get hurt. So the only option you have is stay away from these people. But going back to the original question, Charles, it is that experience that is needed to change people, because they have to see what's really, truly, genuinely going on.
Okay, but you saw it in the 1960s and 70s. You just said that Abraham Lincoln, of all people, I assume that when you say it's on the Mississippi River, that must have been in his trip down the Mississippi to New Orleans when he was a kid. he saw it, and I guess that would have been the 1830s, maybe the 20s even, late 20s, early 30s when he came down here. And Jessica saw it this is the 90s, right, Jessica?
Yes.
And I mean, if it's still going on, Jessica just said it is. I don't know anybody who's in that age group. And I mean, thankfully, my son, when he was in elementary school, he basically went to all white schools, so I never had to face any of this. But it sounds like people already have the experience, and far from changing the majority viewpoint. I mean, Jessica just said it. She just said, I won't, I am the way I am because how I was raised. I know I am the way I am because how I was raised. And so it almost has nothing to do with this shocking experience of seeing the reality. Our ideologies are kind of fixed. I mean, did you change your ideology on seeing this, Kenn?
Yes. When I grew up in Indianapolis, I grew up in a white community. When I was in kindergarten, there was one little black girl. Her name was Katie. I don't know why I remember that. I just do. In junior high, we had 3 black girls. They pretty much stayed to themselves, but they were never, ever a problem, just decent kids. But what I learned growing up was red and yellow, black and white. They're all precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. And that was our perspective, is that there's no difference. There's no difference, one race, the human race. That's the way that I was taught. But it was that eye-opener of being immersed into reality that opened my eyes. I mean, at no point, never, ever did my parents ever, that I can recall, talk about race. I think maybe once Mom said something to the effect that it had something to do with character. It didn't matter what color you are. And but outside of that, growing up, I saw black people when we take the bus, go downtown. I would see black people when they'd come by to pick up the garbage, once a week. We had a little black community about, I don't know, maybe 3 miles from our home. And they pretty much stayed by themselves. And that's where those 3 girls that were in our junior high class came from. But, talk about segregation. We were segregated, and I knew nothing about black culture, nothing whatsoever. I didn't know what the big deal was when they had the March on Washington, with Martin Luther King. Martin, what's his real name? I don't know. But I was basically not taught anything at all about race other than just what you kind of pick up along the way. But church that I attended was all white. The neighborhood was all white. The school was almost all white. It was just all white. And this is before 1965, And the nation was 85% white. So it just was not a big deal, but it was the immersion into that culture in high school that got my attention. I mean, it's like being thrown into a tub of ice water, just that dramatic. And yeah, you couldn't walk on the black side of the cafeteria. There was a place that they called, there was a part of the campus that was called Negro Square, only it was a different N word. And you did not walk in that part of the campus, because if you did, you get beat up. Just that simple. So everybody knew not to go there. Now, there was no white square. And you never went into the restrooms, ever. Everybody understood white people do not use the restroom. Because if you did, and I don't know what it is about black guys, but they like to hang out in bathrooms. I've seen that not just in school, but other places. Somehow they're out of sight, out of mind. But, if you had to go to the bathroom, you just held it. And fortunately, I never had to, so maybe once. But that was how life was. And it was so dramatically different from the way that I was raised up to that point, 14 years old, I think, when I enrolled in, when I enrolled in high school. It was just drastically, dogmatically different. Not dogmatically, but it was drastically different. And so that's why I say, had I not had that experience, my point of reference would be very, very, very different. And when I try to explain that to people who have never had that immersion, that baptism into, what would you call that? Reality. And you try to explain to them what it was like in high school. They say, oh yeah, we had the same thing in our high school. We had these little cliques, and this little group of kids that were maybe punk, and this other kids who were country, and this other kids who were, athletes. They are totally clueless. They have no idea because they've not seen it. They've not been there. And the media hides it. Just try to put a video of Black violence on YouTube or Twitter. I mean, it's like water on a duck's back. It's gone on a hot day. I mean, it just, they'll take it down quick. And there are a zillion of those videos out there because it is so permeating in our culture, so prevalent. So the information is there, but they're hiding it. And the reason they're hiding it is because it will change people's perspective if they ever have to experience it. Now, if they go through,
you have obviously talked to people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've been talking to people your whole life. Jessica has probably been talking to people her whole life. Has it ever changed anybody's perspective in your experience? What you say?
Who are you asking?
Both of you. You go first. But I want to hear Jessica too. Jessica told, I think Jessica's told me one story about a Black girl that she persuaded, but
I cannot remember one single person that I ever persuaded by telling them anything. You got to experience it. I mean, videos, if a picture paints 1,000 words, then a video paints 1,000 pictures. Those are impactful because, you see this white guy getting mobbed by Black kids in a food court somewhere or wherever it happens to be. That is impactful. That's why the social media won't let those go up, but nothing. All right, a picture paints 1,000 words, a video paints 1,000 videos, but experience, or 1,000 pictures, but experience paints 1,000 videos. And until you are in the middle of it, until you see these guys coming after you, until you know what it's like to be sucker punched in the back of the head, and you turn around and you know one thing, you got to get out of here, you're going to get hurt. Until you are immersed in that, you have no idea. You are totally clueless. You just can't comprehend it. You don't have that point of reference. So no, I've never convinced that I know of. Maybe I have, just didn't know it. But to my knowledge, and I don't talk about it that much, but when I do, usually people just kind of, yeah, right. They just don't believe it. You may as well talk about Santa Claus. It doesn't register with them. They think you're blowing it out of proportion. And more frequent or more commonly, they would say that, well, this guy's obviously a racist, or he wouldn't even be talking about that. And I had an experience, I may have mentioned this to you once before, where I was in a Dairy Queen talking with a friend about, not about that, but about Black history. And really just kind of benign, some of the things that that were not told, And there was a woman, and I think two probably grandchildren sitting at the table next to us, and she got up and huffed and took her kids and went and sat somewhere else, so they wouldn't have to hear what we were saying, because apparently she thought we were racist. Now I'm basing that, she didn't say anything, so I'm basing that on body language, interactions, but that's how we're conditioned. That, reality is skewed. Now, this is a classic case. You guys, I'm sure, know what it means when we talk about gaslighting. Typically, that means where somebody is presented as being mentally insane, and they try to convince the person, himself or herself, that he or she is mentally insane. Well, replace insane with racist. And what is happening to white people worldwide is, well, it's gaslighting. We're trying to be, they're convincing everybody that white people are racist, and they're trying to convince white people to much success that we are racist. We're being gaslighted, and we don't even know it. Okay, did I bore you to death?
No, you disturbed me to death.
Good.
I'm trying to figure it out because, like I said, I have so little relevant experience.
Which is hard to believe because you're down south. You know, you would think you'd have all the experience and I would have none, but it's kind of reverse.
Well, to me, what I was thinking, I guess through my experience is it's kind of like it's in their DNA. You know, everybody talks about how they're going to reform the black man, and they're going to give him a college education, and they're going to put him in a good neighborhood, which is usually our neighborhoods, by the way. And then they're going to give him this nice job, and they're going to put a badge on his shoulder and make him such a good person. But the only thing about it is, you know, I mean, there are some examples that it may happen, you know, it may be positive, but the 9 times out of 10, usually when you give them all these gifts, they revert back to what they are, you know, their DNA. You can't, I mean, what they always say, I'm just being honest here, you know, you put a turd down, you put sprinkles on it, you can't, you're still a turd. And that's not trying to be racist, but it's true, because the 9 times out of 10, it's like I was watching Jerry Springer today, and you know, the woman was like, I have 5 bachelor's degrees. So it's
why
like,
would you watch Jerry Springer?
5 bachelor's degrees. So what did you do exactly with those 5 bachelor degrees? Are you a career college student? What did you learn in those 5 bachelor degrees? They're obviously not very useful in modern life at this point, because you wouldn't have went out and kept going and getting other ones and getting other ones. Certainly the technical field would put you out in a job, but then all these senseless bachelor's degrees, and she obviously didn't have a job. But usually when you get them in the groups, they I don't care how good that they get it, how they're blessed, they will always revert back. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's ever a time that you have like a large group of them and you're doing something, and then you know you got that person there and they're doing all kinds of stuff, then their friends show up, they'll turn against you. I mean, it's proven fact. You know, they're talking about where, well, we were against segregation back in the Jim Crow era. Well, they're going back to segregation now on their own, because what do they got? They got the Black Caucus, the NAACP. Well, we'll talk the SPLC, because that's pretty much the other league. The ADL, obviously. Then you have all these different, like the BET, Black Entertainment. I don't see any white entertainment TV, but and then you have, like, even my governor today said he was going to spend $27 million for gun violence. Okay, so gun violence. I'm watching all this stuff on the news tonight, and there has been an uptick in crime, almost 100% in all the localities. Well, guess what they're doing? They're all done by didn't do nothing. The black gangs that will come out there, and they're out there busting windows out of cars in broad daylight. It's obviously not hard to see who did it. And then you got all the other didn't do nothings just watching it happen. Then I've seen on the news where they're actually going into department stores and stealing jewelry and the smash and grabs and the
Flash
shooting.
mobs.
Huh?
Yeah. So, and every single one of the perpetrators didn't do nothings. So it doesn't matter how much money you give them to educate them. It doesn't matter what kind of communities that you put them into. It does not matter because it's in their DNA. So
Well, that's
take
akin
me for
to
whatever you will.
that's akin to educating me to play NBA basketball. You can educate me all you want, but it ain't going to happen unless you force them to take me on, which I'd be happy to take $1 million a month or whatever they're paying now. But it's not going to happen. Now, I've noticed that Black people who are highly intelligent or average intelligence, they don't need handouts. They're doing just fine. They're able to secure college educations or a trade or a skill or build a business, and there's more of them than you would know. So it's got nothing to do with discrimination. And by the way, you go back to the colonial era, there have always been wealthy Black people in America. I can't remember the guy's name, but colonial America, there was a Black shipbuilder, and he was phenomenally wealthy. There was no discrimination. But if you were to take out a historical timeline going back to 1619, and not quite that far, but wherever Black people have been established in this country, there have always been successful Black people. There always has been. Even in the antebellum South, there was can't remember their name, and I need to start memorizing these things, but there was a Black couple in Charles' neck of the woods down there, Louisiana, and they were quite wealthy even during the slave era. They owned slaves themselves.
No, there were lots. There were actually they referred to them as castes. There was the octoroon caste and the quadroon caste and the mulatto caste, and a lot of them actually did come out of slavery and do extremely well, and they had their own society to themselves.
Now, this one particular couple, I wish I knew their name, but they donated money, I guess like a trust fund, to build a school for Black kids, for Black orphans. And I mentioned that to you once before, Charles. I think I sent you a photograph.
I remember this, and I remember we looked it up at the time, and I can't remember it offhand, but basically, what we've done is kind of interesting. The title I selected for today was "White Fears, Hesitance, and Resistance," or something, or refusal to deal with issues, and all we're talking about is Blacks and what Blacks do. And I guess your initial reaction was that white people needed to experience, and I mean, I guess from the interesting thing is you two have much more experience than I do, and I am with you in ideologically, but most white people are not. Most white people think that we're abominable, we're monstrous, we are this pathetic relic minority that opposes progressive racial policy. I mean, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, they think they think we're the bad guys. And
Charles, that is true. But if they're taking a road trip and they need to refuel their automobile, very seldom do they take the exit that goes into the Black neighborhood. And what's that guy's name? Bettajug or whatever. He says that's because there are no Black exits or exits to Black neighborhoods. But they know they don't live in Black neighborhoods. They know better. So it's like they have a dual belief system, that they have a core reality, which they know what truth is, but that is shrouded by this social justice mindset. and where they're just kind of signaling because they don't want to, virtue signaling because they don't want to be demonized as they're demonizing us. It's kind of like saying the kid has cooties because, well, if you don't, they will say you have cooties. So, you know, I think that may be the mindset, but I think it's suppressed. But we know that because your belief system is made evident by your actions or your inactions. But these people live, you know, in secluded, isolated, insulated white communities. And it is from there that they protest. Black Lives Matter, you know, they hold their signs up. If you care about Black lives, get out of your white community, move down to the urban jungle, go into the Black housing project. You know, if they won't let you in, get as close as you can, live amongst them, help them out, open a store, you know, and sell whatever for discount, whatever you can do, just do it there in the midst of them. That's one thing that maybe there are some left-wingers that actually do that. I never met one, but I'm sure they're out there somewhere. Well, let me take that back. You know, every month I do a accumulation of Black on white homicides. And there was a young Black woman who did just that. She moved into a Black neighborhood because she was a social justice warrior, and she wound up on the list. You know, they killed her. These people, if they don't know it, they're going to find out real quick. But I think a lot of that is willful ignorance. I think deep down inside, they know there's a problem. They haven't experienced it, so they don't have that point of reference, so they don't know the severity of it. But once they experience it and they have that point of reference, that fake shroud that they're wearing, that mask, that just shatters, because, you know, they cannot, with, if they have any morality at all, white leftists cannot with good conscience keep believing and saying they believe what they believe once they have undeniable experience. That's just my opinion.
Jessica?
Well, yeah. I mean, like you said, the mass majority of the people that do that white guilt stuff, you know, the whole true that says, you know, there's no way that any of that's true. The stuff that is on the news, oh, that's not true. That's just that one little section of Blacks that probably has had it really rough life or whatever reason, or they've been misguided. But the thing is, the difference is in the way that we were brought up. You know, I mean, all three of us come from different, you know, backgrounds or whatever. I mean, I obviously didn't get a prestigious anything here. And, you know, I grew up in the county, so I really didn't have a large amount of Blacks, you know, living. But like I said, they took me on a bus an hour away so that we'd be kind of like the guinea pigs, that we would be forced into this Black school, Black dominated school, and basically be thrown into the pits. So, and the mass majority of the people that complain are the ones that do have the privilege. You know, the ones that complain about what I think, or, you know, or Dr. Hill thinks, that, or whoever, you know, on our side, you know, white nationalist standpoint or whatever it may be. The first thing that they want to talk about is, well, you shouldn't be that way. But again, they come from, you know, really nice homes and nice communities, as he was saying, Ken, and they've never went out past that gated community. I don't see all these prestigious people going to Ferguson, Missouri when they were having that riot there. I didn't see anybody, I don't see any white people in the middle of Chicago living in the middle of that filth up there. I don't know how much you've been. I've been like Kedzie Avenue. I mean, there's graffiti everywhere up there. It's just a shithole. And, you know, now you get to worry about, well, hey, you know, I'm driving down Interstate 55 through the middle of Chicago, or some gang member some didn't do nothing gang member going to shoot me on the interstate. That's very possible. But wait a minute. Those gun laws that they have facilitated on the city and the state of Illinois, they should cover us, right? They should get us from being shot.
Here is a quiz for you guys. You're not going to get this right. But Malibu, Jessica's talking about leftist and white neighborhoods. Malibu demographics. What percentage of Malibu is white? You want to take
I would say it's majority Mexican.
91.53% white.
Malibu.
So
really, yeah.
Malibu.
That's one of the highest rent districts in the world.
Yeah. So all these white leftists live in their white enclave. African.
Yeah. Now look up Compton. Look up Compton. See how white Compton is, or again, like Chicago, or even Fort Worth or Dallas at this point.
Black or
Rouge.
African American, 1.05%. So I'm guessing that's Diana Ross.
Yeah, right.
That's their ghetto. That's their jungle. What did you say? Look up what?
She wants you to look up Compton and South Central or close.
Yeah, look up Compton versus Malibu.
He's already given us Malibu. It's 1% black.
Yeah, well, versus 91% versus how many white people live in Compton and survive? How many white people live in the central part, not on the outskirts, we're in the gambling district over there on the over there by the river, or not the river, the big pond up there, but I mean, in the center of town, how many blacks live there? Criminals, didn't do nothings.
My understanding is one of the blackest areas in the country is Gary, Indiana, but this says 32.9% black. This is Compton. 25.9% white. Apparently there's a handful of Indians, like less than 1%. Less than 1%.
So 25% white.
I'm surprised there are any white people in Compton.
Right. They're probably diversified whites. But yeah, Gary, Indiana. I remember going there, and I mean, it's just a shithole. I mean, I don't even go there anymore. If I ran out of fuel, I would not stop there. If it was the last truck stop in the world, I would not go there. I remember pulling in, and I was parked on back row, and there was this one truck. He was backing in, and this other truck was pulling in. He was pulled into the spot that this guy was backing into. So of course a fight ensued. The one that was backing in, he didn't do nothing. And then the white guy that pulled into the spot, I mean, I don't know why the guy did it, but but then he turned around, he went like 3 trucks over and got another easy spot he just pulled straight into. Well, then he goes over there and pulls out a gun and shoots the white guy right there in the middle of the parking lot, right in front of everybody. He already had a parking spot, but he killed that man over a parking spot.
That is low impulse control. It's low IQ. They're unable to consider, this is part of psychopathy, but unable to even consider the outcome. You could go to jail, prison for the rest of your life. Doesn't enter their mind. They can't see beyond the present. Gary, Indiana is 78.47% black. And I guess that includes Michael Jackson. I don't know. He was black, but he changed.
I was going to say, isn't he kind of dead and not eligible for counts anymore?
No, he's a Democrat. He gets to vote. White is 15.28%.
Well,
so look up Chicago. Look up the demographics in Chicago.
All right, Let me type it in.
Or Detroit. We all know about Detroit. I don't know if any of you all have personally been to
Everybody
Detroit
knows
lately.
But this is the interesting thing. Everybody knows all of this stuff.
Right.
Everybody actually knows all of this stuff. And yet, you know, Joe Biden is president, but nothing that different would be happening with demographics if Trump were still president. Nothing happened, nothing changed demographically because of Reagan or Bush or Trump. I mean, did it? You know, the tendency, the democratic tendencies of the United States have been constant. They've been fixed, and they're not changing. And I mean, I wanted to know, and then again, my question for the show was, how do we explain and change white fear to address the issue? And Kenn says put them in the situation, but it seems like realistically speaking, they've been in a situation, and if they've got $20 million to invest in a house, they move to Malibu. And Malibu has roughly the same demographic profile that the United States did the year I was born, which is 1960. You know, this was a 90% white country, basically. And so if you want to have that profile, you don't, well, there are other places that are 90% white too, not just Malibu. But how are we going to improve the reality that we're living in? I mean, Jessica, you're a member of the League of the South. How is does the League of the South propose ameliorating, making it better, changing?
Well, I mean, just bringing in more of an awareness. I mean, that's really all that you can do. I mean, you can only hold a liberal to his feet to the fire, but so much, because the mass majority are going to deny. It's like, yeah, okay, well, you know, I see that stuff on TV. That stuff's not true. It's not the blacks that's doing it, you know. But I mean, you literally seen Detroit like right before your eyes. I know back in Clinton's age, and then Obama, you know, pretty much sealed the fate there. And Bush did it too. When they go in and they bring in, you know, all this trading, NAFTA stuff, and then, you know, all of them say, I think Reagan was responsible too. He says, we're going to make this country a service-only country. And that's it, you know. And so basically all the manufacturing jobs left the states, the cities. And so Detroit, I remember when I first started driving, it was a very, very prosperous city. I mean, you had homes of the middle class. They worked at Chrysler and GM and Ford up there because, I mean, back in the day, Detroit was a bustling town. I mean, it had all the manufacturers there. And then as soon as NAFTA come in, it pretty much sealed the fate of Detroit. So where we had all the white communities and the really nice homes and the really nice businesses, then they brought the blacks in. Now look at Detroit.
Well,
mean,
you know,
every
Jessica,
single
Detroit
part-
looks to me like they took Lagos, Nigeria, and plopped it down in Michigan. I mean, if you look at,
it looks like looks like, you know, when the nuclear bomb went off.
yeah,
And so
just trash everywhere.
Who is not aware of it? I mean, you know, 10, 12 years ago, Detroit has actually pulled up a little bit, but 10 or 12 years ago, you could buy houses in Detroit for $10 or $20 and they weren't selling. You know, eventually people, you know, started, the Chinese and Japanese and some Arabs started buying up Detroit, and they started buying up these properties and improving them. So, I mean, Detroit is having a little bit of a renaissance now, but everybody knows that was happening. Gary, I haven't really thought about Gary, Indiana, since I used to, when I was in law school, drive through it to get over to the Indiana Dunes. but and there's awareness is there. People know that for whatever reason, Black society is just not the same as white society. And I mean, there are a bunch of rich Black people who talk about improving the status of Black communities, and they don't accomplish anything either.
Well, it goes back to what Jessica said. It's DNA, you know.
Well, so everybody's in denial and nothing's ever going to change it. I mean, is that where we are?
No, I think they're in denial, but I think I approach it like you would approach a dangerous religious cult. You got to deprogram people. They're in denial, but reality, there's a kernel of reality still in these people, but you got to get through to that. And my understanding of the best way to deprogram somebody is to expose them to reality. Now, how you going to get that done? I don't know. But if you take somebody, and I said this earlier, and move them into a Black housing project, and just leave them there for a year or so, see what happens. They will come out a different person. I mean, you can only get mugged so many times, and your kids can't go out to play without getting beat up. They can't ride the school bus because they'd be raped and beat up. I mean, you can only face that so many times until your denial melts. It's like putting an ice cube, you know, in a hot oven. It's got, you know, you can say the oven's not hot all you want, but you know it is. And if you climb into it, you're going to have to, okay, let me out. I'm convinced. That's what I think has to happen.
If you put an ice cube into it, I mean, maybe this was what is actually happening. And maybe, again, this is kind of the plan. It's pretty horrible. But if you put an ice cube into an oven, it's going to melt awfully fast.
Yep.
It will not come out. It will not come out. And maybe, I mean, there are those who say that it is part of a world program to make white people disappear. Do any of us believe that? And if so, how would we make other white people care?
Well, white people are disappearing. Whether or not it's by design. Go ahead, Jessica.
Well, a good example of this is my niece. I just went to, last month I went to a family event, and unfortunately, my brother picks really bad communities to live in, and he makes really bad choices with his life, and I'll just leave it at that. But then I have my niece, right? She looks a lot like me. But the difference of me and her is totally different, because to listen to her talk about, the critical race theory, obviously she's being programmed in the school system, and she has this ideology that, Blacks can do no wrong. Even though she lives in a really bad neighborhood and she sees the crime and violence going on a daily basis, she basically buddies up with all the Blacks, and so does my brother, unfortunately. And he has made some really bad choices, and he's currently paying for those right now. But with that being said, my niece, there is no hope for her. She has been brainwashed to the extent that you're never going to pull her out of that ideology, that she and the whole new generation, the whole next generation that is current right now in school, is being taught this critical race theory stuff. Even though they're trying to fight it, it was going on when I was in school, and then now it's going on with this new generation that's in school right now. The only way to stop it is to get rid of that. And who puts that in place? The JQ, obviously, has a hidden agenda with that. They're the ones that are basically turning the Blacks against the whites and vice versa. Because ultimately, if you have two fighting forces, taking front stage, then what are they doing behind the stage, behind the scenes? Obviously, taking over the new Babylon, basically.
Kind of like the French turning the Indians against the British or the Americans.
But yeah, it's all
That didn't
strategic.
work out too well for the French, did it?
Triangulation. Yeah, no, I don't think it did.
That's basically how the French lost the largest empire in North America.
What is that?
It's fascinating. I don't know. I mean, the Jewish synagogues here in New Orleans are very wealthy. They're in the best part of town. And one of them has a constant banner posted, "The stranger is welcome, no fear. Sanctuary for all." Is that I mean, I've actually never been inside that that synagogue. I've been inside the so-called conservative synagogue. You remember Jenna, Kenn? You had her on your show a couple of years ago. Anyhow, I went. Jessica knows Jenna too, and that's it's the only time in my life I've ever been inside a synagogue. But I went in with her, and we went into the so-called conservative synagogue, and the rabbi, or I guess you'd call her a rabbet, I'm not sure, it was a woman, a female rabbi. Her quote unquote sermon was singing a song in favor of social protest and liberalism, and specifically in promoting immigration. And that was the conservative synagogue. And Jenna tried to convince me that was not the typical Jewish synagogue or service at all. But it's the only one I've ever been to, and I've never been back. And, is that really the dynamic behind why? I mean, because it doesn't explain why. I mean, Jews are only, 3% of the population, 2% of the population?
I don't think that's correct.
You think they're more?
Yeah, I mean, whenever your grandparents or your parents always told you the term, don't let them Jew you out of this or Jew you out of that, it took me the longest time to understand what that meant. And even the terms of Pinocchio, all the things that, even to, a lot of the cartoons, even all the way down to Sesame Street, you had that, the large presentation or whatever. But it's just funny how, like, the whole part about being, don't let them Jew you out of it. It's the same way with Jenna. So when I met Jenna, I remember she was in that RV and everybody felt so sorry for her, and she was just living on the road and she had no money and she had a disability check, and she simply Jewed people out of their money. There was people giving her money left and right, and then I found out now her family is rich. And she only goes out and earns this money, just extra, but still plays the game that she's poor. And so I remember even some of the league members back when General Lee came down in New Orleans, she was living and sponging off of league members down there. They were actually giving her money so that she could keep money in her, or keep gas in her generator and gas in her RV and food on her table. And come to find out, she was just incredibly rich.
1.9% of the total U.S. population is Jewish. so you could see
Yeah,
tears.
well, I think it's more than that because they play that part about they're not very prevalent, but they're saying that the white population is what, like 54%? No, probably maybe like 18 or 16%, because the population of the white people is just plummeted. I mean, we're being completely replaced by all the different groups or whatever. I remember. I mean, I know it's kind of off base a little bit, but I remember I was watching this thing about tribes and stuff. Like the Indians and even like the indigenous people in like Africa. The most dangerous tribes in Africa and Brazil and stuff like that. And the person that is narrating it says, well, in order to survive, if you come into their territory, you must learn how to assimilate with them, because if you do not assimilate, then they will kill you. And so really, in essence, that's what we should have done. We should have said, you either assimilate or not come here, or you can expect the worst.
Well, Bill
And so that's
Johnson
what we failed.
says that he doesn't want them to assimilate. He wants them to go home.
Do I now?
Keep your identity. Bill Johnson often says that he doesn't want them to assimilate. He wants them to keep their identity, keep them separate.
So they destroy our identity. They bring their own customs, the things that they left back at their home place that they hated, and that they were destroying their populations. And then they said, well, America is so great. America is just this land of the free, of milk and honey and all this stuff. And then they turn around and bring their factions to the United States and destroy everything that the white man created in the United States. So that's where we are today. That's why the United States is failing, the economy, everything. I mean,
that goes back to the goose that lays the
speech.
golden eggs.
Yeah, you remember that speech that Joe Biden, old sleepyhead Joe, he gave when Obama was in office, the other screw up. So he got in there and he said that by 2021, people like him, of European descent, will be an absolute minority. And he's sitting there with a smirk on his face, smiling and saying, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, actually, he said
good thing.
Actually, he said 2017.
Oh, okay. Well,
so
all right.
He missed it. But the point is, he is anti-white, and he's anti-white majority. But what these guys don't understand, or maybe they do understand, is that what is good for white people is good for everybody, because we are the innovators. And when you take out the innovators, you take out the innovation. You wind up with 80. You wind up with, in the best of circumstances, Nigeria. That's what you wind up with. South Africa, but they still have a white population. If it weren't for the 6 million or whatever white people in South Africa, that would be just a slum, Actually, if it weren't for the white people, the blacks wouldn't be there. It'd just be the Bushmen. But South Africa, I think, is the second most prosperous country in sub-Saharan Africa, if you consider the South Sub-Saharan. But number one is Nigeria, but that's only because of oil money. There's one tiny little country in Africa, I can't remember what it is, but it is phenomenally wealthy because it has offshore oil contracts with Exxon. I'll have to look that up, but none of the money goes to the people.
Maybe so.
Could be, I don't know. I know whoever the head of state is filthy rich, and I saw a documentary on it. His son was in Paris buying suits. I mean, he didn't have to go shoplifting, he could buy them. But the point being, it all reverts back to the norm. It all goes back. And that's why I say you take Lagos and you plop it in Michigan, you call it Detroit. Are we
Well,
done?
it's like all those you see on those on the TV, all those info commercials where all the big bloated little black kids are in Africa and flies sucking the water out of the sides of their eyes and stuff like that. But here's the thing, the mass majority of South Africa was funneling in food to feed all of these swollen bellies. And then of course, instead of helping the white man continue to feed them and nourish all the peoples of Africa, including the blacks, and help them and assimilate with them, then they went in and destroy them. And now you see all the bloodshed constantly from the farmers. And I mean, they're like, well, that's our land. That was stolen. No, that land was not even cultivated. When they took it over, there was no one living there, period. So
Well,
they
the
took
Bushmen
it
were
and they
there, but,
created a country.
yeah, the Khoisan were
And
there, but not the Bantu were not in South Africa, as far as I know.
They were immigrants. They came in.
Yeah, they came after the Dutch.
There was the Khoi.
Khoisan.
And
I just call them
I just
Bushmen.
looked it up, by the way, in the per capita income in Africa. Top one is top two are actually islands. The islands of Seychelles and Mauritius. Those are basically because of tourist money. And then on the continent, it's not called Guinea-Bissau anymore. I guess it's called Equatorial Guinea, and that's 18 per capita, 18,240. Really not all that great.
Of which probably none goes to the individuals.
to the Chinese, they pretty much take all the wealth and they strip the ore from the earth, and they don't give any of the poorer people that live in the communities anything. And so if they wanted to do something creatively, then they would take and do it more of a like a capitalism kind of thing. But to me, what they got in Africa right now is their upper echelon, which is communism again. And then they got their bloated bellies, basically, the really poor people that are living out there living on nothing. But again, they don't know that the white man is down there feeding them and giving them what they need. Just like in America, we built these cities and we gave them economy and we gave them everything that they have right now. And then they're destroying. What is it? That just bite the hand that feeds you.
Can you guys think of? Could you guys think of one neighborhood anywhere in the United States that was built by Black people? And I'm talking about physically built. The architects, the architects, the construction workers, the person who did the community design. Can you think of one? Or is every single neighborhood, Black neighborhood in America, a formerly white neighborhood?
For some reason, I hear crickets.
Yeah,
I hear crickets. There is none.
No answer is a no answer. Yeah. Are we done? I got bologna to eat.
We can sign off for tonight. I mean, but I've never gotten even close to an answer other than Kenn saying, "Put white people in Black neighborhoods." In other words, ironically as it sounds, Kenn's solution to the lack of awareness on the white people is forced integration.
Well, education.
Really what it is creating cognitive dissonance where they can no longer deny reality. So that's how you deprogram people. You create cognitive dissonance. So they either have to adhere to their myth in the face of undeniable reality, which very few people can do, or they got to admit, okay, I was wrong. People don't like to admit they're wrong, but if you're stuck in a Black housing project and you're going to stay there till you face reality, they're going to come out, would be my guess. The question is, what do we do about, how do we get Black people to change? You know, how do we get those conditions to go away in the first place?
Maybe we should take that as the topic for you know, the next show, because you know, if you look at Kenya and Tanzania in East Africa, those are examples of Black countries that seem to be doing at least okay, right? I mean,
Yeah, but they're influenced by China. Look at it. Who owns those towns? Who's paying that? China.
By the way, I got an answer for that, Charles. How to rescue Black people everywhere.
how's that?
Well, we're going to save it for next time.
Okay. Well, anyhow, y'all have a good weekend. Jessica, I'll probably be talking to you about other things, but Kenn, great to see you. And well, let's just keep thinking positively and creatively, because I think we might be close to the only people who are trying to do that.
Well, I think you may be correct. I mean, not just the three of us, but yeah, I think you're onto something.
Anyhow, good night, everybody. Talk to you soon. Thank you very
All
much.
right. Good night, Ken.
for
Good night,
joining us.
Charles.
Thank you,
Bye,
Jessica.
guys.
Thank you,
Take
Kenn.
care.
All right. Dividends.